Chapter 46. A Legacy Passed On. Late 1930s. Pack age. Unwanted, uninvited, she was a real package. In the spring of 1937, a shooting took place at the Welcome Home Schoolhouse during a church meeting, which left Deputy Sheriff Jim Gilliam and Elton West dead. Jewel West was shot through the abdomen, but lived. Tim Reed and Gus Phillips were later arrested by the county sheriff and charged with murder. A newspaper article is at the end of this chapter. The year of 1938 brought a downturn in the struggling economy. The Great Depression was still being felt by many families. The New Deal of FDR era had brought some relief, but many still suffered from a shortage of jobs and money. Unemployment reached a high of 19% that summer, but Earl continued with his high school enrollment at Marshall while working at the Lindsay Hotel for the Conleys, and Perry continued with his middle school training at EMO, Welcome Home, while living with his grandpa, Giles Turney. A program under the New Deal was to improve roads and bring modernization to more of the rural communities. One of the projects that came to Bear Creek was a road improvement of the road known today as Arkansas Highway 27. Although, when this first improvement was made, it was a dirt road that would run up Bear Creek to the Harness Farm and continue up Lick Hollow around the Devil's Racetracks, until it reached the low gap at the Chinquapin Cemetery Road and continue up the hill, topping out at the W.J. Gates Lane. Later, the road was improved on top of the mountain, passing through Emo and around to Tilley. The road replaced an older and steeper route up the mountain. The Hornbeck Trail was a shorter route to Emo, but restricted to foot access only. Riley took a job using his mules to help build the new road. Using a road slip, the large horse-drawn shovel could move about a wheelbarrow of dirt at a time. Dynamite was required for large rocks, and a horse-drawn grader shaped the roadbed and ditches. As the work gang made their way up Lick Hollow, a rock was turned up which had the shape of an arched handle. One of the men noticed the limestone rock as they ate their lunch, and before long the men tried to lift the rock by its handle, but were unable to grip its thick handhold so as to lift it clear of the ground. It was a feat of hand grip and leg strength combined. Riley Harness had a strong grip, but was afraid he might not be able to lift it, as the other men had already failed. But after work that day, he tried it when no one was watching. Sure enough, Riley could grip and lift the rock off the ground. Upon telling his boys, Clifford and Troy went up and hauled the rock back to the Bear Creek farm. Over the years, it was the rock of crushed egos, as many young men couldn't hold their grip when attempting to hoist the natural monolith. Troy Harness would own the rock in the years to come and kept it at his house. He loved to see strong, athletic boys fail, and then he'd show them up. The Harness Rock is still retained in the family. The new road going up Bear Creek and up the mountain was called the Pike by the community in the early days of its existence. Some early roads were called pikes, and the term turnpike was used for the best roads built in America. The pike on Bear Creek allowed for the automobile to make trips that before were nearly impossible. The Harnesses started to see hauling trucks as well as cars passing by. The occasional passing of a motorized vehicle was a spectacle, and when the boys heard them coming, they would run to watch them pass by. Clifford claimed to have a nose like a good hound, and by getting down on his all fours, he would sniff the dirt and tell his brothers what kind of car had passed by. In the spring of 1938, William Alexander Billy Harness was 79 years old, and it was apparent that his health was failing. He walked with a cane and liked to use it to strike small stones. I suppose it was his form of golf. His exclamation was to say the words, "Oh, Shaw," or sometimes to repeat it, "Shaw, Shaw." While he could, he would walk across the pike to the barn to make water, as he called it. Getting out of the crowded house and walking a little was about all he could do then. When Billy became weak and bedfast, Riley noticed a rattling sound in his breathing. Knowing that it was serious, he rode his mule up the mountain, crossing Red River, and ascended Reeves Mountain. From a distance he could see that the flagpole had a red flag flying. It was a practice by Dr. M.C. Reeves to let folks know that he was gone on call and was not home. However, Riley rode on to the house, and Mrs. Reeves came out and told Riley that she would send the doctor to Bear Creek as soon as he returned. Doc Reeves had delivered Riley's son Earl 19 years earlier. Riley rode his mule back home and waited for the doctor. When Doc Reeves arrived and listened to Billy's breathing, he told him that they could expect Billy to expire in about 4 hours. Perry, who was 13 years old, recalled how within minutes of the 4-hour prediction that Billy's heavy rattling breath stopped. His earthly days were done. Riley stepped to the double window of the south side of the room and looked up Lick Hollow, with a look that Perry said was lonely and sad. His father stared long and hard out the window as he pondered and processed his thoughts. Late in the afternoon on April 14th, 1938, one of the little chicks that the mother hen had scratched for was gone. Billy's body would need to be buried soon. He was washed down and laid in his bed as a good neighbor the next morning set about building him a coffin. Riley had 2 wide boards in the barn loft, which he had stored for the occasion. William B. Stewart and his wife Jerotha lived just to the south of the Harness family, between the branches that flowed into Bear Creek. B., his nickname, took Riley's double-headed chopping axe and drove it into the chop block, so the other side of the bit was turned upward. Then with a hammer, B used the axe bit as a shear to cut square nails down to size for finish work. Perry said it seemed like a sin to treat his dad's axe that way. B sawed and planed boards until he had the shape and fastened them together, forming a coffin. While B. Stewart was building the box for Billy, Riley rode his mule into Marshall to buy a half suit. Perry and the boys thought it was so strange to buy such a garment, but after the coffin was made ready, Billy was placed in it with his backless suit. Others dug a grave at the Bear Creek Cemetery near his wife Katie and his daughter Martha. His father Alec and mother Jenny rested nearby. 3 generations of Harnesses were all planted 'neath the trees and grass. The next generation would mostly be planted in Boone County. Gone would be the days of Billy Harness sitting on the porch, looking where the evening sun had set, and saying to his children, "This is another day that the good Master has given us." Billy had joined his mother and others in a land where the sun never sets. No mother or father leaves this world without leaving some of themselves alive in the living. Even though Ellis had died when Billy was only 1 year old, there was an impact from an absent father. By God's design, the 2 boys and their mother would face life without a father and a husband. Some personality traits are passed on by the genes of each parent. What each of us receive, we modify and pass on to the next generation. Genes don't lock us into a personality that we can't change, but they serve as a default if we do nothing to change. Reflection. I want to believe that some of the good qualities of my ancestors reside in me and my children. What Jenny, Billy, Riley, and Earl passed on lives in me and mine. The mothers become one flesh with their husbands and blend their traits also into each offspring. Every person is unique, and when traits are mingled with personal faith, the physical and spiritual person can reflect their heritage. That is why I consider my Christian heritage so valuable and why I am writing this book for my children and family members. I am reminded of your sincere faith, Timothy, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also. 2 Timothy 1:5.